Do I think that this is a long-term thing? Yeah, I don't think that those people are going to be very happy to be doing this development for a long time, man.
But why would I want to let somebody else buy one of the houses instead of me trying to buy them?
Make the offer. Are you willing to go firm on one? No, you need all of them.
Somebody's going to go firm on one?
On one, yeah.
You have a buyer that will go firm now on one of those houses?
I'm not going to say I have and the words now in the same sentence. But I have someone who might in the future, right? And I may have someone now.
Well, I might in the future, but I need to tie it up first.
Well, that's what I'm trying to tell you is like, I'm just coming up with other ideas here because there was not our previous engagements were not well received.
Because of us or because of the
I think there's a lot of factors. I think there's a lot of factors, right? But sometimes sellers are just, they know too much, you know, when you get a bunch of sellers who are living in their houses and stuff, and they're like, wow, I'm going to get this great premium. It's fine. But when you have like a mortgage broker or a realtor, an investor, and like all these people, like they all think they're geniuses. They all think that they're going to outsmart everybody, you know, like they know what they're doing, you know, and that becomes a problem. But there are some expensive deals right now. Some of the deals out there, like $300 per buildable. Like there's some really expensive stuff out in the market right now. Guys are asking big numbers, like that Shep Bathurst and Shepherd site that I sold.
Zoned?
Some of them unzoned, but like big
$300 a buildable for unzoned. Where?
One of them was zoned that I saw that, but other ones are big numbers.
Did it sell?
They're not selling. No
way.
They're on the market.
People keep sending me one caps for industrial, and it's like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah.
Who the hell can work with a one cap? Anyways, TK.
Welcome to the show, Darryl.
Welcome to the show. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Canadian Real Estate Show. What's our agenda today?
Do we have TK, an agenda? I have an agenda. And listen, in the past week, we have been called by some pretty influential people, like the Tom Story. Oh, no, it wasn't Tom Story. It was Steve Carish. Named us the best Canadian real estate show on Sundays at 4 p.m.
I think we are the greatest real estate podcast that's ever existed in the history of podcasts that airs on Sundays at 4 p.m.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's like such a realtor way of pumping up the stats. Hey, you ever read those? See, because I'm in the industry, I always read the fine print, right? When it says #1 here, #1 there, you always got to read the fine print.
I think I finally found the #2 realtor in the GTA.
Really?
Yeah.
That guy is amazing. Just for his honesty alone, I would hire him.
Right?
Yeah.
There has to be #2. Like,
yeah, I'm number 2 in every market. I'm not #1. That would be the marketing.
I'm not the best.
I'm not #1 would be the best marketing that a realtor could do.
Where did I put my notes?
Why don't people think of these things?
There they are. Well, there's did you see that billboard? The guy's like, I hate my job too. He was a realtor.
Yeah.
Did you see that? It's like, no. I don't even understand this, but
yeah,
that was the billboard. I hate my job too.
Yeah. Call me.
Let me work for you, because I'll be a miserable sack.
Super optimistic about everything that I'm dealing with. Right.
Have you seen what's going on with the Mattamy protests, TK? Have you seen this?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about it right now.
It is so stupid. It is so interesting. And I think we are going to...
Ineffective.
Probably ineffective, unless... Well, what's the goal here? So we got this doctor lawyer guy, right? Who, you know, has a social media presence of being, you know, somewhat affluent. You know, he's got a couple of Teslas and he's got affluent friends, and he's a baller, right? He's a big baller. And, you know, he's a lawyer, he's a doctor. I mean, he's doing okay.
Man of many hats.
Many hats, TK.
And apparently not a real estate investor.
Well,
he didn't get
not
that
a good
hat
one, right?
to fit on his head. That's for sure.
Well, the hat fit. It just he didn't do a good job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, who in their right mind speculates on not one $2.4 million new construction home, but two $2.4 million pre-construction homes? And these are not houses.
To buy two of them. That was a story when he's in the line. Hey, what are you getting? Oh, what lot are you getting? Yeah, I'm gonna get lot 53 and lot 77. Right?
Look at me. Look at me.
Whoa, I bet he drives a Tesla.
Oh, I'll bet he has two Teslas.
I bet he's a doctor and a lawyer.
I'll bet he's a doctor and a lawyer.
You know what, Darryl? I think we should cut this out because this is really bad press, right? So let's not throw this guy under the bus too much. I think he's going to get enough.
I threw him under the bus so hard. He's going to get enough
roadkill as it is. I don't
on Twitter.
Yeah,
I hit him hard, and then some people started talking about libel suits.
Yeah,
and slander suits.
Let's cut it. We're a mainstream show now, Darryl. We got to be careful on what we're talking about.
We need to talk about this though. It's big.
Yeah,
it's big.
But
it's a big story.
Take it easy on the guy. I'm sure the guy's a great guy, and I'm sure he has made a mistake and that he's learned from it, and he's going to come out the other side a lot better.
I think that is not correct, and I think that it is actually indicative of the sickness that we have here in this real estate market. And I think it's a much bigger problem, right? And I also think, this is what I was just thinking. So we got Aspen Ridge canceled. We talked about that last week, right?
Yep.
So, and we have Mattamy now, dropping prices a ton from one phase to the next.
To get them sold.
So I think, and I'm probably wrong because I generally am, but I would think if I was another developer, builder, the same or close in size to either of those guys, I mean, there's not too many of them, but I mean, would I not be going, well, if Aspen Ridge can do it, and they didn't get slaughtered.
It's not, our company that's screwing everybody. It's just, a sign of the times.
Jump in the pool.
Now's the time to go.
Jump in the pool.
Now's the time to go. Lower prices, launch projects. I think there's a lot of projects launching. There's projects that are launching right now that have been trying to launch forever. And all of a sudden now it's like they're launching, and I'm seeing it because I'm in these WhatsApp group with all these agents, and it's like, here we go. Then you've got the projects that have been for sale for like over a year, and they are throwing incentive after incentive after incentive. It is like a trip, you're going to get a trip, and you're going to get, we're giving away a car to one lucky agent, and your commission was going to be here, but if you sell 3, it's going to be here. And that's like, they are throwing
7-8% commissions
much at these projects to get them sold, which tells me they're not moving. And there's advertisements. There's a couple projects that I won't name that I've been following, and that they are advertising like crazy. They're spending a ton of money, because if you got 200 houses to sell and you have to take $100,000 hit to get them sold, that's $20 million, right? So why not go and drop $500,000 on some ads and marketing, right?
Sure, to keep the price up.
The problem is
you end up losing both.
Exactly. The problem is you don't know. You're just starting to marketing. The way marketing works is you have to be doing it consistently for a long period of time. For me, just to go and start marketing a project and all of a sudden start putting it on XYZ, billboards, radio, TV, whatever, nobody recognizes it. They don't even know what you're talking about. There has to be a continuous stream of information over a long period of time. And that leads to more sales because you've built a brand, you've built success, and you've captivated the audience. And they just don't understand that. They think, well, so-and-so is successful, so he's advertising. Therefore, if I just copy what he does, I'll be successful too. It's just not how it works.
Unfortunately, it is not quite how it works. And unfortunately, we have to end this discussion because we have wonderful guests waiting in the waiting room, folks. And I don't want to leave them there because we're lucky to have them. And this is a perfect timing for these guys. We have Rob and Hart from Rent Panda joining us today. Oops, what am I doing here? Here they are. Almost in. Rob and Hart from Rent Panda. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, hello.
Welcome
Good
to the show.
day. Welcome
White
to the show.
t-shirts. Damn, Darryl, we should have done
Matching white t-shirts.
Well, matching Rent Panda t-shirts.
Even better. See,
we don't even have merch for our
we
show
need
yet.
merch,
We
TK.
need
What are we
merch.
doing
Slacking.
here?
Well,
Well,
we know
okay.
some
Nice to meet
people.
you guys.
They know a guy, TK. They know a guy. This is great. Well,
We
good
need
to
it.
meet you. We were introduced by Mr. Foch. So thanks, Daniel Foch, for the introduction. Thanks for joining us today on this lovely day here in Toronto. You want to introduce yourselves briefly?
Sounds good. My name is Hart and my colleague is Rob, and we are partners in Rent Panda. And Rent Panda is a platform and service for landlords to get all the support they need through their journey. So we provide products and services for landlords to make more money, save more time, and excel within their life cycle as a landlord.
Make more money. That's all I heard, TK.
I think, there's an important part of making money, and that's, having the right property in your possession first, right? So that once you get it, though, if you want to keep making money, then you need to hire guys like you two to be able to keep the ship on course, right? Our conversation just before you joined was all these pre-construction people who've been buying and overpaying, and there's a lot of mess going on out there, right? With the market changes and stuff, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's for sure. And Rob and I were just talking beforehand as well about the fad of real estate investing. We found that over the last couple of years, there was a lot of people that got into real estate investing, wanting to be investors, but not realizing that being an investor also comes with being a landlord or hiring the right people to landlord for you. So a lot of people have overpaid. A lot of people are stuck with properties that they think can get more rent than they can actually get, even though rents are skyrocketing, and we can talk about that. But there's a lot of people that need education and hand-holding along the way. Not that that's bad, but that, the market is shifting. Things are changing in this crazy world quite rapidly. And, finding the experts, hiring the experts, and educating yourself as an investor and as a landlord is incredibly important. And that's part of what we do at Rent Panda, and also what we're trying to support landlords who don't use our service to do, just to get educated. And we're landlords and investors ourselves. So we've learned it the hard way that you got to invest in yourself to get forward in life.
Rob, it's a pretty crazy space to just jump into, not knowing anything about it or thinking you know something about it, isn't it? It's a lot of money, a lot of risk, and it's not passive.
Yeah, outside of, we were just actually talking about this as well. Outside of the financial aspect of things, if you just isolate time, I think as you jump in as an investor and you're shifting to be a landlord, right? Just even thinking about property maintenance, the issues that can come up as your portfolio grows, that alone could be essentially a part-time job to almost a full-time job, right? Outside of the financial aspect of things. And then, obviously when you buy a property, depending on the scale of it, more issues come up, which means more cost, which means, essentially less cash flow, or even worse, negative cash flow than you're already dealing with. So yeah, for sure. In terms of education, just to hit on Hart's point, what we're trying to do as hopefully 2023 rolls on is just hit home about the education side of being a landlord. And, it doesn't stop at being an investor. There's way more time that you have to, basically put into your business overall, right? To make sure it's functioning.
I think that something that's very clear is that it doesn't matter how much education certain people get or how much help certain people get. There are people who shouldn't be landlords. The emotional toll of landlording is sometimes just not something that certain people can bear. The average person can definitely do it, right? And then of course there's the skilled operators who might be able to do it, with or without help from a property manager. But there's a class of people, we've all met them, who just doesn't matter what you do or teach them or explain to them or help them with, it's just not for them, and they should consider something else. But the fad, like you guys were talking about, has brought this greed out of everybody, where it's like, hey, if I can just be a landlord, I'm going to be able to make all this money like everybody else. And it's greed. And again, no education and stuff. And the landlord tenant board is full of those landlords showing up unprepared to be squashed.
Yeah, I think that just for that point, I think most times when we do run into that situation. Luckily, we worked with some really great landlords, and whether it's, a partner that brings on a landlord or from a previous relationship, is that when you have goal setting from the start and a landlord knows or an investor knows exactly what that property is going to be, in the short term and long term, it's a lot easier to have those conversations, right? Because if they are negative cash flowing, or it's a conversation about, hey, I know that there's going to be more short-term investment in this property, whether it's time and money, then it's an easier conversation to have, especially for us to work with the landlord. And as you said, like, they're an easier to landlord overall to understand the systems that are in place for rentals. So for sure, there's always going to be people that shouldn't be something in any industry, but the landlords that we work with definitely are more open to the education side, and they are able to build those foundations and the systems so that nothing is a surprise, or if it is a surprise, they've essentially had some type of problem solving goals that they've set in. So
I think one of the biggest factors at the moment is these investors that bought pre-construction with the pro forma showing negative cash flow, but positive appreciation over time. For them, some of them, it was like, okay, it's worth it because in 2 years I'll make $100,000 or whatever the number is, right? But when you have these uneducated investors buying pre-construction units to put them out on the market, and now they're upside down on the appreciation side, on top of losing money every month. It's like there's a big storm brewing, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure. And what we see on our end is the culmination of that storm is landlords coming to us saying, I've got a 1-bedroom in downtown Toronto, and I know rents are growing double digits every year. So let me get $3,500 for that 1-bedroom because it faces the CN Tower and has waterfront views. And yeah, there may be 1 or 2 properties that have been sitting on MLS for 90 days or more that are at that price, and that's why they're sitting. But these investors just believe that they have the best asset possible. And when they look at the math, they need that cash. They've bought, they've over leveraged, and they're not going to have that appreciation anymore. And so they turn to cash flow as a solution. And the reality is the market demands what the market demands. We're not going to have tenants paying $3,500 for a 1-bedroom, no matter what it includes.
But my agent told me I could.
No, you might get them to sign the lease.
Told me I could. I have a pro forma here that shows $3,500 from you, right? Like,
but you get them to sign the lease, and they agree,
yeah.
and it's like, wow, I can't believe I did it. But the reason that tenant was willing to do it is because they're the worst tenant that you could possibly ever
They're
get.
not gonna pay.
And you're gonna have way bigger problems in about 3 months.
Exactly. And most investors, when they get into that situation, just focus on what is the rent amount. You hear these stories of overbidding for properties, and that's typically agents bidding against agents and pushing their clients out of their comfort zone. And then, we've got entrepreneurs who have rented properties and the business goes a little bit sideways. And the first thing they stop paying aren't their bills for the business, it's rent, because they know they've got 6 to 9 months before anything actually happens to them, and they can always catch up on it. That's the broken system that we have in Ontario. But ultimately, landlords and investors need to protect themselves up front by getting, either agents that know what they're doing from a leasing perspective, or hiring the right professionals who can properly provide a rent assessment, who can find the right tenant. And don't over leverage yourself so that you're not in a rush to find a tenant, because the worst situations occur when people, finish the construction or renovations or get possession of that property on the 27th of February and want it rented out by March 1st. That's going to cause a problem. And we can get someone to sign the lease.
The guy's ready to move in tomorrow, or it's a great tenant. He said his stuff's already packed. It's in a truck, and tomorrow he's going to pay me my price.
With 3 months up front, and then nothing after that 3 months.
Right.
Yeah.
So these are the sign of the times. I mean, we're talking about a lot of things like back to basics and all that kind of stuff. For a while there, we had people who were just not looking at the fundamentals anymore, that they, weren't following the script, that there were examples of people who made money with these sort of like risky type of investment, opportunities. And so now people are saying, well, I got to go back to basics, and, cash flow, like multifamily's slow right now. There's barely anything moving, and there's all, different reasons why, but it's like people are really going back and looking at the numbers now. And my first thought is just like, why did you ever leave that? Like, why would anybody have ever made that decision? You know, knowing that they're negative cash flow, knowing that it's only appreciation, knowing that, you know, their unrealistic expectations on rent or anything like that was the only way that this worked.
Social media influencers.
I guess so. I don't know, but it's scary. It's scary.
I mean, there were a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of people pushing the idea that this is easy. You're going to make a lot of money. I can show you. I can help you. You could get somebody to manage the unit and still make money and blah.
I've never heard investors who are good investors pitch that. I mean, it's realtors. Okay, I get it. You know, salespeople, they're trying to get you to buy something. But I mean, as far as any course I've taken, video I've watched, book I've read, like they're all pretty consistent in what they're telling you to do for an investment strategy. Sure, like there's not a book on like appreciation out there. And this is a, you know, game changer. Like I haven't read that one.
Ultimately, I mean, the hard things are worth doing, right? And even at the start of COVID or in the first year, when there was a lot of money to be made with that strategy, or you know, the people that were working hard to find the right deals were making a lot of money with alternate strategies. You know, Peterborough blew up because everyone was trying to get out of Toronto. Guelph blew up as a student rental market. Hamilton blew up. There was a lot of opportunity there. But now 2 years later, these investors who want to, you know, jump on board with trends that they saw 2 years ago and are investing in Peterborough or building, you know, beautifully renovated homes in Peterborough, the market is just not the same. You know, people are coming back to Toronto. There isn't the demand for absolutely stellar, beautiful, newly renovated units in that city demanding the rents that people thought they would. And so it's those people who are at the forefront, who are doing the hard work of not only, you know, finding the right tenants, managing properties right, but finding the right investments in the next opportunity. They're the ones that are leading the charge. And a lot of people that are coming after them are finding themselves in hot water because the market is changing so quickly.
So tell us like what you guys are up to, right? Like, what is it? How did Rent Panda even get started?
Yeah, so the inception story of Rent Panda is a little bit cliche, but we started actually up in Thunder Bay. So Thunder Bay often gets mistaken for North Bay. It's even further up north. And my brother and I founded the company. We were both tenants at the time, and we found a rental platform that was kind of leading the charge in Thunder Bay. And you had to e-transfer a guy $20 to get a Word document list of all of the listings in town. And we thought, if this is the way that people are finding homes in Thunder Bay, you know, it's likely the way people are finding homes in other tier 2 markets. And I was actually in Toronto at the time, and, you know, viewit.ca was still the leading platform that people were using. And so the system was clearly broken. It was clearly in need of some innovation. And we started to build tech products for the small landlord, and especially in tier 2 markets. So we built a marketplace where landlords could post their property, message tenants, book showings, screen their tenants properly, build leases, and actually manage that tenant. And after doing that for a couple of years and expanding down to the Tri-City area and then across Ontario, we found more and more passive investors who were looking not necessarily for technology, but for leasing and property management services. So the natural progression was away from a pure technology company into, you know, tech-enabled real estate, essentially, where we've built teams that can find tenants and manage properties based on the technology that we've built in an efficient way and really protect landlords and their investments. So like Rob was saying beforehand, education is kind of the pillar of what we do. We've got some formal education. We partner with people to come out and give kind of landlord 101 educational courses, but primarily working with investors on a one-to-one basis and educating them along the way, along their journey to find quality tenants for them. And that's similar to a realtor, you know, but it's a Toronto phenomenon to have realtors do that for you, essentially. But we provide leasing services across the province. And that's everything from a walkthrough of the property, photos, videos, doing all of the marketing and advertising, showings, screening, lease building. Rent assessments, which are incredibly important, all the way through to the end of that journey. And, you know, a lot of landlords want to self-manage at that point. And then we also provide kind of a no-frills property management approach as well for the fully passive landlord. And we've done everything from, you know, room rentals and sublets all the way up to full building lease ups of, you know, pre-construction. So we work with large scale investors, small scale investors, and everything in between to build products and services for them.
want to talk about the services a lot in the tech today. I think those are two areas that I think are really strong, but just make me understand how finding tenants, because there's so many places that tenants look, right? You have Facebook Marketplace, you have Kijiji, you have Realtors, Realtor.ca, View It still around, and there's other sites. So like, how do you ensure that your clients are getting, you know, the exposure to make sure that as many tenants know that their properties are up for lease?
Yeah, we have essentially what I would say is it's like an art and science, right? Each market is a little bit different than the rest. I'm in Hamilton now and cover the Southern Ontario market, and Hart's in Toronto. So a little bit different in terms of the actual sites they're posted on. So listing sites could be a combination. You know, we have our own site that landlords can use. It's free for them to post their properties. Tenants are free to look. We don't charge, and that's just a service that we have. It's a platform they can message landlords directly so they know they're real. That's one area. And then obviously there's other listing platforms that we would use, Marketplace, Kijiji, you know, if it's a market that deems, you know, rentals.ca, for example, pretty popular in Hamilton, you know, we would essentially post across multiple listing sites. However, you know, what you're stuck with as a landlord is really is it available? Hi, can I come see it? You know, when you get a plethora of messages, it could be sometimes upwards of 300, right? We've had tons of properties that just have so many tenants, and we essentially, what we do is we filter them down. So, you know, a relationship starts from the first message, and someone who says, is it available? It's just not enough information for us to go on. So, and that kind of leads into the technology side. Is we built a screening platform, or a tenant screening platform for landlords. And it's a tool that we use to essentially go through a pre-screening or pre-application stage prior to showing. So we'll list on all these sites, make sure we get the appropriate amount of tenants. You know, it's a very low percentage overall versus initial interest. And then we filter that through to the showing stage. So, you know, it could be anywhere from 100 messages could cull down to 9 in the end, something like that, right? In certain markets. And really, before they come to the showing, we know a little bit about them, you know, whether it's, you know, living situation, how many parking spaces they need, what they do for a job, pets, things like that, that just help us know that tenant a little bit more and essentially be the arm of the landlord, right? We're really in their shoes for that approach. And we're trying to make sure that we are comfortable with that relationship from day one and know, you know, who we're renting to at the very least before they get to the showing stage.
Is there a way to like search for these professional tenants, I guess they call them? Like, is there some kind of a search that can be done that shows that they've done this before or numerous times, or that they're in the middle of a LTB hearing?
So yes and no. I would say if you look at the tools in the formal conversation around how to spot professional tenants, there are sites like Canly or Open Room where judgments are supposed to be posted, but there is just as much conversation about the delay in posting or the lack of posting altogether that's in there. What we really stress with our clientele and our leasing team when we train them is not how to look for professional tenants, but how to look for your quality tenants, because ultimately professional tenants don't have perfect systems. And when you do the screening the proper way, those professional tenants fall off. And the proper way is a couple key factors. So one huge thing is pulling your own credit checks. So we have a tool that's tapped into Equifax, and we pull our own credit check. We don't care if the credit check is from Equifax and coming from a realtor. You know, we've seen fakes. We see fakes all the time. We do not trust anything unless it comes directly from us. And if there's any shade of a doubt that you know, may be a little bit off, we don't go with that tenant. Like Rob said, you know, volume and exposure is not the problem. It's about finding that needle in the haystack of that perfect tenant and that perfect fit. The other thing that we have is income and expense verification. So through open banking, we can actually tap into someone's bank account with their consent and see the payroll deposits that are coming through, see the government income that's coming through, see the rent that's going out. And if they say, you know, they have no pets, but they're making a transaction at PetSmart for $42 every month, it's likely they have a pet. You know, if they say
not
they're
that
not
we would
smoking,
exclude you because of that, but you know,
right.
just Or just pattern of behavior here, right?
Yeah, maybe you have a condo that has a bylaw that excludes pets, so you can do that. But the reality is that screening for the right tenant is a lot more important than screening out the wrong tenant. And a lot of the conversation that exists on social media, in the news, is about the professional tenants, the scammers, and things like that, where they're a very, very small portion of the population. And ultimately, if the professional tenant is going and having something listed on Canly about them, they're likely going to change up their profile. They're going to change up their systems. They're going to get a different ID and fake ID to make sure that things pass. And they're going to get through, your attempt at spotting a professional tenant. So you want to spot the high quality tenants, not the professional tenants.
I have a very small property management background, and I've been a realtor for about 15 years. I've never seen a professional tenant pull a fast one on a professional landlord.
Right.
Me.
Fair enough.
It's a vulnerable landlord that they prey on to be able to get away with
the way
what they're
that
getting away with.
The screening system that we set up, there's always going to be inherent risk, right? And I think that a landlord needs to accept the fact that there always going to be a low volume of risk. But the screening tool that we set up, and how Hart and I discussed it and how we wanted it to be built, was every time you find a little bit more information, or the screening tool is a little bit more advanced like ours, it's reducing the risk significantly to you overall as an investor and a landlord, to understand more about the tenant, the situation, and there's more questions answered on your end. So the comfort level and that gut feeling of can you rent to a tenant is essentially answered in the data that's provided in that screening tool. So totally agree with what you're saying in terms of a professional landlord. That's why we built that system in place. Like, we talk to landlords every single day, multiple times a day, to get the feedback, to build that tool, to essentially have that information available for them to screen their tenants, and ourselves included, right? We use the tool as well.
Yeah.
So you guys are kind of one-stop shop on the management side. It's like tenant placement, tenant screening, property management, all that kind of stuff. What about like, do you have a paralegal that you work with? So if there's ever collection or eviction issues, you have somebody that you're...
We've actually got a paralegal on staff. So that was one of the key things that we did at the start. And again, kind of to paint the positive versus the negative, yes, we have her on staff if the proverbial, shit hits the fan. But we also have her on staff to build bulletproof lease appendices. So one thing for all the Ontario landlords out there is, yes, you have to use the Ontario standard lease, but you can add appendices, you can add an addendum with as many clauses as you want, as long as they are legal and enforceable. And that's the big asterisk. So again, to your point, TK, professional landlords know what is enforceable at the LTB, what are things that they can actually put in the lease. The landlords that don't educate themselves are ones who will throw additional deposits in there, or pet clauses that are actually unenforceable. And if you end up at the LTB and you have a bad lease appendix, that adjudicator is going to look at you as, a slumlord, or as someone that's trying to pull a fast one on people. So you want to make sure that you've got that bulletproof lease appendix crafted by a paralegal. So right away, we've built a paralegal service into our offering. And we also partner with outside paralegals, because we know, one person is not enough to deal with everyone's paralegal issues. So we work with a number of partners across the province, and soon to be across the country, that can help out in any case. But really for us, part of what we offer is our network. So when a landlord comes to us for posting a property, or education, or leasing, or property management, if they have anything in terms of a need outside of our core base, we've networked with the entire industry to make sure that we can pass them off to a partner that we trust and that they can trust. So really, like you said, it's a one-stop shop. And even if we don't provide the service, we will find someone that does, and make sure that our landlords are supported in their journey, and that they're making money, because when they make money, we'll make money and everyone will win.
So I don't want to be too much of a plug today, because I want to make sure that we're talking about a lot of different things, and we'll talk a lot about your guys' stuff, right? So it's no issues there. What are the big issues that people are coming to you with today? Like landlords who already own a property, they're just like, guys, help me. This is what I'm dealing with. What are you doing?
So we can probably talk about, first and foremost, I think, affordability standards and what is the norm. So we, again, I don't want to plug this, but essentially we do have a rent report that we released for 2022. The biggest thing for us when we built that and started putting that together month over month was just showing that the original affordability standards from a landlord, and they're looking at tenants if they're doing their own screening, was usually a 3-to-1 scale, right? Of like income to rent amount. And right now, what we're looking at is in some markets 35 plus for the most part, and in the major markets, you're looking at 45% plus. So just a new norm in terms of what is affordable anymore, and what that tenant looks like is a big one. Because I think
is that after tax income? Or
it would be, yes. So, and it would be like the median income. So technically, yes, some cities are different, but in terms of like average median income per major city, that's essentially what you're looking at. And I think that's the biggest one, because what they're looking in terms of scrutiny of tenants and what you're looking for from an income standpoint, which doesn't define a quality tenant, but it is a portion of that, is essentially different, especially now moving into 2023 with rent going up. That's one aspect of, an investor or landlord that they're looking at, a tenant side that needs to take that into consideration when they're evaluating the criteria of a quality tenant.
Yeah, I actually had a note here to talk about this as I was reading your report, and it didn't strike me, but I mean, you don't have to be a genius to realize that people have to use more of their income to afford a place right now. But the fact that it's gone from like 30 to 45%, I mean, that's a gigantic increase when it comes to, one line item on your monthly budget, right? But what's even so there's that percentage, but there's also like the rents are going like crazy, right? And the quality of the spaces is plummeting, so all simultaneously. So
why do you say that? Why do you say the quality?
Well, because my daughter's trying to find a place right now, and if you could see the stuff available in a price range for young kids that have not much income, like if you're looking at $1,800 a month, and you want to live anywhere near Toronto, like the stuff that you see is disgusting. If you're lucky even to get your own place. I mean, I'm seeing $2,000 a month for like the bedroom in a 1+ den, where the owner is going to sleep on the couch when you live in their bedroom. And I'm not even kidding. Like there's multiple.
Single females only must apply.
But if you look at Facebook Marketplace right now, and you look between $1,500 and $2,000, like go see the goddamn garbage that you have to live in right now.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, competition is only increasing, right? As time's going on. If you look about just rent being increased from 2021 to 2022, just like straight from a province standpoint, Saskatchewan was up 43%, Alberta 36%, Manitoba 19%, Nova Scotia 13%, Ontario 9%, and Quebec 12.5%. So like from a rent standpoint, yeah, essentially rent's going up. There hasn't really been a change in what is the overall, I would say competition's got worse. And those markets that are traditionally less affordable, like, Vancouver, Toronto, Victoria, as Hart said, Peterborough's up there, Kelowna, Hamilton now is getting there where I'm from. So essentially it's getting harder to find a place, rent's going up, and yeah, the quality, I would agree. Essentially you're in certain brackets when you have a certain set budget, and now you're having to kind of compromise right with that and find something that works for really a rental situation that's probably not ideal for you, as you're saying, for your I think it was your daughter, right? So difficult.
And Darryl, to your point, about the rents going up, the reality of rent control is that prices of everything is going up, right? Everyone is pinching pennies. We're in a recession. Not as many people are moving, and yet demand is still incredibly high because of various factors, which we can jump into. But when places become vacant, the burden of the increased prices that the landlords are paying falls on those new vacancies, right? The new people coming in are going to bear that burden. So even when we look at, a 9% annual increase for Ontario, if you distill that down to newly vacant units, that number would be astronomically higher, because everyone who stayed, we could only increase the rent by 2.5%. So those new vacancies are bearing the brunt of that. And a lot of these investors that we talked about beforehand, who are building or renovating units, are putting them at the top end of the threshold. No one's really thinking, I'm going to build a half decent, $1,800 a month 2-bedroom. They're thinking, let me pump everything into that unit so that it only attracts the best of the best. And it's going to be absolutely stellar: quartz countertops, marble floors, whatever it ends up being. And no one is really catering to the middle of the market where there's so much demand. And so when agents get involved and push bidding wars for places like your daughter is looking for, that really creates the system where the middle housing inventory that we do have in a city like Toronto is being escalated even more than that 9% and even more than whatever the number is for new vacant units. So it's making it incredibly difficult. And I mean, we won't even get into affordable housing, but that segment of the market that your daughter is probably looking in is the most acutely problematic in a city like Toronto.
It's endangered. Yeah.
I
was in an 8-plex yesterday in the Annex, and this guy's, I don't know, he's a portfolio. He's selling a few different buildings. So I've looked at a couple of them now, and you can tell he did all his renovations in the 80s. And hasn't touched anything since, right?
A lot of pink and green, a lot of pink and green.
Just all the, the type of cabinets and everything. You can just tell like when it was all done, right? And
shag carpets back in.
Yeah. Shag was in the 70s.
Can you imagine moving into a place with somebody else's shag carpet? Like, what the hell could be in there?
Yeah.
But there's definitely properties out there. But yeah, I mean, once they change hands, the landlord, you're absolutely right. The landlord says, how do I increase the income on this property? And I'm going to renovate so that someone's going to pay them more. And the quartz counters and the vinyl plank floors and the new paint and all that kind of stuff will get you more money. Will get you more rent. I just had a guy, one of our friends of the show, Art, I'll shout out Art. He posted this publicly on Facebook, but he just refinanced one of his buildings, that I don't know what he paid for it, but it's a multiplex, maybe 20 plus units out in New Brunswick and stuff like that. And he put all the money in and he netted a nice big chunk of change afterwards, got the CMHC MLI Select financing afterwards, 95% loan to value, 4% interest, 45-year amortization, so like he's doing it right. Like the professional investors are out there and they're, doing things properly. And that's what you do is you go in there and you take over these buildings that were undermanaged and you make a ton of money. And so those units are endangered. They're just going to be continuously replaced as time goes on and buildings change hands.
Well, so I mean, imagine a family looking for a 2-bedroom. Like, how much is a 2-bedroom right now in a decent area that is actually like livable?
It varies quite a bit, and I think
Thunder Bay.
Even in Thunder Bay's rents are quite high. Actually, it's pretty insane. It's a great market to invest in as an investor because property values are still quite low for the amounts of rent. You can get a 2-bedroom up in the range of $1,500-$1,600 in Thunder Bay, whereas if you look at Sudbury as an example, that's down around the $1,300-$1,400 range. Although Sudbury's exploding in its own regard, but when you mention how does a family afford something, what we're seeing a lot of these days is non-traditional families coming together, which makes landlords incredibly uncomfortable, which makes insurance companies incredibly uncomfortable. But that's the reality of the rental market. New immigrant families coming in, it's not the platonic family of 2 parents and 2 kids. It's 2 parents and 2 kids and an aunt and a grandmother and maybe a friend who's helping out pay the rent because that's the only way that they can afford it. And 2 or 3 people living in a bedroom is not abnormal. And that can be the case whether you look at dilapidated housing in downtown Toronto or you look at beautifully renovated new places in a city like Guelph. Because when a family moves to that city, they decide they want to live there. They want quality housing too. And they're going to make the family unit whatever it needs to be in order to afford that rent. So that's one of the major changing dynamics that we're trying to educate landlords about is, allowing multifamily or dynamic family units into the home and also accounting for higher insurance rates. That insurance company, if they look at more than 3 or 4 unrelated people in the home, they're going to tack on a big sizable amount to that annual payment because they perceive it as a higher risk investment for them. So it's just changing dynamics that.
Why is that?
I mean, insurance companies are archaic glaciers that move with the speed of snails, and ultimately they see a family unit as the lowest risk tenant profile. They look at students, regardless of whether or not you're a PhD student on a full ride from university or a first year frat boy, as the exact same. They say students are dangerous, students will damage properties, students won't pay rent.
They got
Whereas
the
our
numbers on it.
experiences,
They're probably right. Yeah,
they may be, but we would argue that.
But there's probably
right
evidence
students,
along the last few decades that show they've paid out more on student housing than they have on single family, right? So
for sure, but there are those trends of cities with student housing run by slumlords charging out the ear, and angry parents not paying that rent because they're guarantors on it when there hasn't been proper plumbing in the house. What we see a lot more of these days is quality student housing popping up in centers where there's still a lack of supply. Cities like Guelph, Peterborough,
crazy.
Even in Toronto. Yeah,
Guelph,
we
crazy,
just rented.
Right? They've just basically like everybody who applied to University of Guelph got in, and they were like, we don't know where they're all going to live while they're out here because no one's really from Guelph who goes to Guelph, and they'll just figure that out on their own. And there's like, I see pictures online of lineups at houses for people just to go and look at a property. Like they're all waiting outside in the cold just to show the one unit.
We did a leasing job, and it was a great investor who took a single family home, small little bungalow, turned it into a 3-bedroom upstairs, 2-bedroom downstairs, top market rents. It was just over $1,000 per room with each of those 5 bedrooms. And we had 250 messages for the place. We filled it quite easily with top quality students who are in 3rd and 4th year, supported by parents who are guarantors. But we heard really sad stories of, this is University of Guelph students being driven to school by their parents every day from Collingwood because their parents could not find them a home. And those parents were coming to all of the showings. Yeah. That's not a commute. That's a commute you're willing to pay an extra $200, $300, $400 a month to get your kid housing. And that's further inflating the student rental market in Guelph, which then pushes more investors there, which may be good in the long run, but it's a long story about Guelph. The bylaws are quite strict, and council isn't really approving a lot of multifamily housing in the city. But there are those select markets where it's becoming incredibly difficult just to live. And there are kids in motels, there are kids in hotels, there are kids being driven to school over 2 hours each way. And something needs to change fundamentally in order to provide housing.
We had that at the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. So there's just a time where the campus grew and then there wasn't enough housing. So they were just doing single family and turning them into rooming houses, which are not legal in Scarborough. And so there was people who are living in like, less favorable conditions, and obviously it's not safe. And a lot of them were international students and things like that. So it became a newsworthy story.
It was bad. We recognized that opportunity years ago, and we bought the corner of Kingston Road and Military Trail right down the road. Big giant piece of land right near the university where there's literally no student housing there at all. Like buying any house, even anywhere around there, would probably be a really good idea, especially now with the new regulations, like legally having a triplex, right? Great area. But okay, so rent prices have gone crazy. Okay, like crazy. We hear some people in the States saying, in the USA, saying that rents are starting to come down right now. We have like crazy extreme perma bears here in Canada saying rents are coming down here, but I don't see any evidence of that. What do you guys see in the next 6 months, and then let's say the next 24 months with regards to rents and the direction that they go in?
So we took a look just to answer the exact question, because we had the same thought. When our business, in terms of looking at the leasing for landlords, we saw definitely stagnation of rent in Q4 of last year, and basically the first month of January was somewhat slow. I mean, that can be attributed to people not wanting to move in the holiday season, cold months, things like that. So what we did was we tried to do some predictive rent for the next year at least and break it down by quarter. So we looked at the past 5 years of increase in rent, and then some projections that we had. Essentially Q1 probably stagnate across the way. No real significant changes. Some markets obviously will. Q2, single digit, about 2.5%, and then Q3 upwards of 4%. That's just a generalization right across the market. And then Q4, we do predict it's going to go down slightly, 0.5%, 1% in rent, but nothing that you're seeing, as I said, the numbers earlier, in year-over-year increases. You're looking at double digits before, right? For year over year. So for sure, it's calmed down a little bit. I think there has to be a tipping point of the rent really having at least some sort of stagnation and understanding in terms of, what is actual market rent versus those insane increases that we saw in 2021 and 2022. So you're not going to see the big returns that you've seen in prior years, especially during COVID time. So I think that understanding as an investor to say, okay, if I look at what was rent last year and a very slight increase for this year, and I'm doing my budget or my finance overall, I can essentially determine hopefully that, either it's going to cash flow or not cash flow. And, I have some predictability across the board. But yeah, it's definitely not going to increase as in previous years.
But do you still see it? It's still going up. Like I don't see, like what factor would push rentals down? Like
when have rents ever gone down?
How is it happening in the States? I mean, they must have a ton of inventory, right? That's the only thing that would bring it down. But I mean, we're never going to see that here, are we?
Yeah, from us, like days on market are still 12 to 15 days on market. So competition's still really high, right? I mean, and that's even probably on the high end for a lot of markets. So for sure, rent's going to go up overall. In terms of the States, I think probably a sweeping generalization about market going down in certain markets, just because non-major city, right? They have so many little pockets that
Idaho's going down.
Yeah. And,
really? Where is Idaho? Anyways?
What's Idaho? It's near Thunder Bay, I think.
Pretty sure. What is near Thunder Bay?
Where's Thunder Bay?
Michigan.
Michigan. Yeah, I heard of that place.
Close to Minnesota. So I think in terms of rent, for sure, it's going to go up. It's not going to go up nearly as what we've seen in terms of.
You hear that, D. Trent? You hear that, D. Trent? They're not going down. They're not going down.
Rents are never going down. It can't go down.
Even 5-year outlook. I mean, unless there's some as Hart was alluding to, unless there's some significant change at a municipality level or provincially, there's really not going to be, a drastic decrease in rent overall, right? Demand's going to still come in. Immigration's going up. There's going to be, more competition as the months go by and years go by. It's kind of an interesting situation to look at from an investor's standpoint. Obviously, hard on renters, but that's the reality right now that we're dealing with.
And that's part of the what do they call that? The support of the real estate market, right? Is that once prices get to a certain point, the metrics are just going to be so good for investors that they're going to want to start buying again. Right, real investors who have the capital and have the experience.
Yeah, with cash.
For the last couple of years, that changed. All of a sudden, it was like Sudbury. You weren't even getting cash flow in most of these deals that I'm looking at. So that'll all start to go back in. Where I've been getting a couple 10+ caps brought to my attention and different things like that. Really small markets, but they're out there. But I'm looking at all these different things that are happening, and I'm like, look, like eventually. Like we got all these new bylaw or these new options for multiplexes and stuff in Toronto and everything else. But eventually, like investors are just going to look at this and say, like, this is a no-brainer. I'm going to be able to get cash flow. I can get this finance 6-7% interest. I don't care. These numbers make sense. And I think that's the support. Immigration's a big part of that. All these other, housing shortages, delays, red tape on construction and permits and all that. These are all the factors that'll sort of keep the housing market in check, because eventually it'll make sense to have rental properties again, which it hasn't in the last couple of years at all. I don't know, like it hasn't made a lot of sense to buy rentals,
and probably more than ever transacted in that time period.
Yeah.
Right. Which is crazy.
I think the overgeneralization of rents going up is often where landlords and investors make mistakes. And TK, to your point, the investor who can look at singular markets and find opportunities there, they're the ones that are going to be winning. And Darryl's your question, how are rents going to go down? I think nothing will bring rents down across Ontario as a whole, but rents may come down in specific markets with specific factors that are coming into play.
Bancroft.
And right now we're seeing Midland as a specific area, and like generally like tiny, like Wasaga Beach and that peninsula
down.
Rents are coming down because Airbnb legislation has changed, and now there's anti-Airbnb legislation in place. And so the market, similar to Toronto early COVID, the market has gotten flooded with long-term rentals, and they're beautiful, fully furnished long-term rentals with hot tubs and saunas, but the actual population that rents there can't afford any of that. And so that middle market that we were talking about beforehand completely disappears, and you have garbage housing and then top tier housing that no one can actually afford, because these investors were grossing Airbnb incomes, not long-term rental incomes.
Does that factor into the average rents, the Airbnb income?
So unfortunately, when we look at CMHC data, it's completely skewed. CMHC only surveys, purpose-built housing of 4 units or more. Why we created our rent report was because our small landlord audience in these tier 2 markets didn't have data that actually made sense to them. So Airbnb data doesn't factor into things from a short-term rental perspective. But once those Airbnbs get dumped on the long-term market, then we can start to see the effect of them, because our data is pulled from a general marketplace approach. So we look at Facebook Marketplace, Kijiji, Rentals.ca, our own marketplace, and we aggregate that data. We don't just look at StatsCan and CMHC surveys.
Yeah, that's top notch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
and so that's where this type of data is really interesting, because as an investor, as we hone it, it's going to become more and more refined so that you can find those little pockets, the Hanovers, the, out Sudbury, outside of Kingston, little tiny markets where there may be opportunity. And you can jump into them, and we'll actually have reliable data from those markets.
Yeah, there's American companies that have owned that data, right, that I'm sure you guys are aware of, and that is frustrating when you want to look at markets and you're like, you got all this great data on these American cities, and then you look for in Ontario and it's nothing.
And why Zillow owns everything pretty much.
And why we chose the median number across the board was we were worried about the smaller, let's call it like tier 2, tier 3 smaller communities, where essentially there's not a lot of rental data available. And when you use average, essentially exactly how Hart said, you have that really nice unit that's going to skew that rental data immediately for someone who's an investor to say, actually I can get this rent, and it's averaging that within this particular market. But for us, we knew that wasn't a true representation of what is that smaller market to look at. And for us, it's more of the actualization of what's going for rent in that market. So when we chose to do that and working with our partner Door Insight, that was essentially where we landed. And I mean, being biased, we feel like our report is better for that reason. It's not necessarily taking our own data and making those assumptions. It's a number of sources, as well as we have that eye on the full market versus just our site.
I don't know if you guys know this or not, but this is the best Canadian real estate podcast that airs every week, Sundays at 4 p.m. Just so you guys know, okay, that there's...
Was that Sundays at 4 p.m.?
Sundays at 4 p.m.
Yeah. And Sundays the best, all in the same sentence.
Yeah, there's nothing better. All right, let's go back to you guys again, all right? So
hold on. Well, I just want to ask one more thing before we get back to these guys. Purpose-built rental. Do you see any incentives out there, or do you hear of anything coming down the pipe that may take a little bit of pressure off this market by developers would build it if it made financial sense, right? So have you guys heard anything, or do you see anything, just as a reference, back in 2015-16, we had a ton of purpose-built rental in the development pipeline. And what happened is, in 2017, 2018, they all switched back to condos because it just didn't make any sense to build the purpose-built rentals. And so we didn't get very much inventory on the market, other than, the traditional way in Canada now to sprinkle it through multiple buildings and multiple owners, right, through condos. But do you see or hear anything coming down the pipe that may incentivize people to build? And I'm not talking 3 fucking units in a house in Port Perry, these big 400, 500 unit buildings that we see splattered all over Brampton and Bathurst and Steeles, and these, is that ever going to happen again?
I would say there isn't anything that is in the current decade going to fundamentally shift developers towards that style of purpose-built housing. Build more homes faster. as you described it, is going to be a tiny little drop in the ocean in comparison to what we need. And there's a lot of NIMBY attitude out there. You know, we've seen legislation being passed that allowed for higher developments in cities like Guelph and Cambridge and Kitchener-Waterloo, you know, allowing more than 9 floors. But then when a proposal gets to council, the entire community comes up in arms because they don't want it in their community. Sure. And so fundamentally, we all need to hold hands and agree that outside of Toronto, and we primarily look at these tier 2 markets, there is a massive, massive shortage in housing that will not be solved with the little 1s and 2s, right? The little, you know, small multifamily isn't going to fundamentally change the game. Yes, it'll increase density a little bit. It'll make our cities a little bit better. It'll relieve a tiny, tiny bit of pressure. There are some developments that are starting from some big corporations on the outskirts of the GTA that lead us to believe that it should be in the pipeline, not just for the massive corporations that can just throw money at the problem and you know, they're in it for the 40 to 60 year investment time frame. So hopefully some of that comes down the pipe, but you know, we've seen 400 or 500 unit buildings starting to go up in Vaughan and up in Kleinburg and things like that. So that hopefully gives a glimmer, but we're still probably 10 years out from anything substantial happening on that front.
Can you imagine living in a purpose-built rental, like high-rise building in Kleinburg? Like,
it's happening. It's happening
everywhere. I mean, it's
crazy.
crazy.
Even if you look
older
at the,
people, right?
the top
like,
of the TTC, right? You know,
yeah, older people,
tons. Yeah,
the Vaughan ones,
yeah, the Vaughan ones that are going up, and you know, there's some big buildings that are being built by big players, and they're starting to become purpose built and not just, you know, condo owners who
I think it's going to
switch.
The mall owners,
there's
like
all
these mall
condo
owners,
applications that are going to shift back into purpose built rentals.
Yeah, but it's this
over
much.
the next couple of years.
It's this much out of the whole thing. It's like
patterns, right?
Yeah, it's the same
but
pattern.
When a player like, you know, Smart Centers, for instance, or RioCan jumps into the game and starts building,
right,
that hopefully will start that trigger. You know, it alludes to the signs that there is money in this, and then the players with, you know, some of the smaller REITs can start to jump in and build. But it's an expensive game, and the government does not make it easy right now.
No, and it's like if you've ever done a pro forma to build a new building, like it's much easier to just buy something built and cheaper. Like you can buy a built unit, like a door that's ready to rock and roll for sometimes even like way under replacement cost, like way under, right? Like there's a reason why condos have to sell for 1 point something million, right? And so it's hard to buy a door for the average of, I don't even know what the fucking average is anymore. Is it $300,000 a door? Is it 250? I guess it depends where, but like, you're not buying it for 1.4 a door, right? So like,
no. And we see a lot of these really quality investors buying, you know, mid-sized multifamily in Mississauga, for instance, and building beautiful units. You know, tenant moves out, they got the unit, it's now beautiful. Rents have been raised by $1,000 a month, but that's not adding the doors that we need to solve the problem.
No, it's just, it's refurbishing an old door. That's
not I always say to people with the garden suites, I'm like, where, like in Toronto, obviously, where can you buy a condo? So you already own the land, you're already paying property taxes. You're now going to be building a unit that you're getting $2,000 a month, whatever it is, in your backyard. That's going to cost you $400K to build, roughly. Where can you buy a condo for $400,000 in Toronto? And then you got maintenance fees, property taxes, and everything else. This is just in land you're already using. So I'm trying to sell that on people.
What the hell are you doing? You're going to move into your own backyard? Like, what? How is that?
I sold myself on the idea, but everybody else is going like,
I mean,
somebody's going to want to live back
there,
Darryl.
The problem is
it costs $300,000 to $500,000, and it's in your backyard. So what are you going to do? You're going to move into your own backyard and rent out the house? Is that what you're saying?
That's an option.
Holy!
You can also rent out the backyard, right? Rent out the suite in the backyard.
I know. Can you imagine?
Brand new, 2 stories.
Yeah, you're having a barbecue with the family.
Bath.
Some guy walks through the barbecue. Can I use the barbecue now? I got people coming over.
Yeah, you got your own barbecue. I built you a deck. Shit. It's 3 feet by 6 feet.
Yeah, it's right there. It's 2 feet away from my barbecue and my party. Oh, what
the backyards are big enough to have these things.
What a nightmare.
All right, so I'm a landlord. I'm hiring you guys. I just bought the property. Walk me through what it is you're going to do for me. And it's in Barrie.
Perfect. So the first thing that we're going to do is bring in our Barrie leasing specialist. We've got people placed throughout the region. That leasing specialist is going to walk through the property with you, even before you close if you want, so that we can really speed up the leasing process. Walk through the property, give you a rent assessment so that you know exactly what the market is demanding for your place. We're going to sit down and design a tenant profile. So who's likely to be attracted to that property? Who do you want in that unit if you're self-managing? Or if we're managing, who do we collectively want in that unit? And then we're going to take photos, take videos, pull all the promotional items for that place, throw a lawn sign on, and start to market the property. We market the property, like we said, across multiple listings, and we're designing our marketing plans based on that tenant profile that we've developed together. So we're not saying, no smokers, no pets, only families. We're going to actually write that ad and design that advertising to bring in the tenant profile that we want to attract together. Once we do all that marketing and advertising, we pre-screen everyone who sends a message through. So we're going to get, 300 is it still available messages. We're going to blast out all of that pre-screening to those people, cull it down to probably the top 10 or 20. Our leasing specialist is going to do all of the showings. They're going to be there for every single showing so that we can really see the whites of people's eyes. We can see how they look, how they smell, whether they offer to take off their shoes when they come in unprompted. Do they treat the property with respect from moment one? Do they park on the driveway and block another tenant in, or park on the road and be, respectful? Once we do all of those showings and gather all the qualitative data, we move on to the quantitative. So we pull our own credit checks, we pull our own background checks, full RCMP background checks. We do ID verification with face matching technology. So we make sure there's no fake IDs, and we can do that income and expense verification. Some
fancy,
pretty creepy stuff.
These guys have this, it's like a click of a button, but it sounds fancy to me and Darryl. We're like,
yeah, for sure. And that's where, as a tech company, we're constantly innovating. So, in 6 months, we'll have another tool to further make things less risky. We call past landlords, ask them a certain subset of questions to make sure they actually are the landlord and not cousin Jimmy. We're going to call employers, verify employment information, verify that income through that open bank check. And then we're going to put forward recommendations to you. We're not just going to say, hey, here's the one tenant that's best suited for your place. We're going to show you what we've done, show you all the people that came through, give you the top 2 or 3 recommendations. You give us a thumbs up or thumbs down, a la, Gladiator being the Caesar. And once you give us that thumbs up, we bring in our paralegal, we build the lease and the lease appendix that's proprietary for your unit. And then we introduce everyone. We send off the lease via DocuSign, so no one has to print anything or meet in person to sign like the old school way. We make sure that those rent deposits are sent through via e-transfer directly from the tenant to the landlord. And we're going to make sure tenant's insurance is in place, because that should always be mandatory on your standard lease, and any kind of other things that we need, guarantor forms, snow and lawn maintenance contracts, because you need a snow and lawn maintenance contract if your tenant's going to do that snow and lawn. And we're going to hand that over to the landlord to then go forward and manage that tenant from there. We can also do the move-in inspection and key handoff if a landlord wants. And then for those landlords that want the above and beyond, we can do the full service property management. But primarily, most people these days, because they are watching their dollars, they're looking for that leasing service, and they want to self-manage so that they're not losing that, typically 5 to 10% of monthly rent that a property manager would charge you.
And going back to that education side that we talked about at the start, really that first meeting is really an education session, right? We work with a lot of first-time landlords that either are brought to us from a partner or, from situations like this where they're introduced to us. We essentially walk them through what it means to be a first-time landlord, what their responsibilities would be, it's a little bit of resources and education along the way so they can do some reading, as well as Hart said, not a lot of times really it's property maintenance isn't thought about, in terms of either a budget or a plan. And we kind of walk them through those scenarios, at that first meeting. So if you're taking into account in the budget or overall logistics, especially if you're, call it like, a long distance landlord, I've had landlords that are in Brampton, for example, and they want to be in the Hamilton area with their property. They're not going to come down, right? If something happens, they need to have, a system set up through property maintenance or, someone else or handyman or whatever it may be to essentially help out in their property in time of need. So that first meeting is really half education, half understanding the goals. And then we work from there, as Hart said, with finding the tenants.
Amazing.
Way more
Guys,
than a realtor would do, just on that
yeah.
side, like 10,000 times more than anything that I would do or any other realtor would do. So management then, okay, I want your management. Like I want it. I want you guys to take care. I mean, my place is in Barrie, but I live in Toronto.
Yep.
Who's
So
doing
we're
that? 'Cause
gonna,
you got a leasing partner. So you got and who's the manager now up there?
yeah, so we've built essentially a no frills management approach that can be done fully remotely as long as we have that regional leasing specialist there with us. So the property management kind of was a step off of the leasing service, where the leasing agent will do their job. They'll place that tenant. They'll conduct the move-in inspection because they're trained to do that and have the move-in documents and the key handoff. And then the management is done completely remotely by our team. So we've got rent collection in place. We've got the ability to triage out any work order that comes through from the tenant. We can use our leasing specialist to do our annual inspections or biannual inspections, but everything is done remotely. So there's a 24/7 call center, there's messaging abilities, there's work orders sent through. And how we differ is that because it is remote, we're going to charge a lot less, right? So we're not a regional player that has a full team of property managers in every single city. That's expensive. That's what costs you 6 to 10% of your monthly rent. And they're still going to charge you for every contractor that comes through and a management fee on top of that. So our fees are typically between $79 and $99 a month per unit. And we're going to handle all of that day-to-day communication, all of that triaging. We've got our inventory of trades and maintenance people that we're going to send out to the property. We also have systems in place where we don't have to visit the property as much. Pin pad locks are going to be standard, an extra lockbox with a key for that pin pad lock in case things go wrong. And we're going to treat the tenants with respect as not a commodity, but as an asset, and make sure that we place the right tenant who can help us manage that property and therefore charge you less for property management. So it's really like the no frills of property management, brought on by what people are demanding these days, in a post-COVID recession world where everyone's trying to save a couple bucks.
And tech friendly. Like, I mean, that's one of my questions was like, how do you guys service all these markets and how do you expand and grow, right? And that was
technology.
It right there, is strictly the leasing partners are the only
and good
requirement
tech
for you to be able to get to, because the tech will handle everything else. Right,
guys.
Yeah, and
what Darryl?
We've gone on forever. We could do this forever. We gotta
we
have
can
you guys
come back
back. Like, we gotta have you back because we've been going forever. I could talk to you for another year. My bladder cannot. So we're gonna have to wrap this up. I really appreciate your time. This was amazing. Love to have you back.
Quick shameless plug though, where guys can find you. We're gonna post all your details, but just for the listeners.
But even more important, you guys said the word cull twice in one episode. Not once, twice. This was the best episode of all time, TK. Cull. Who uses the word call? They did it twice. It's unbelievable.
You guys are smart guys.
Smart guys.
They got bigger vocabularies than us.
Okay, so, shameless plug, and then I got
website and social. Give it to me.
Shameless plug. Go to Rent Panda on any social media platform or rentpanda.ca. All the information is there. And our phone number, the direct line, goes to mine or Rob's cell phone. So when you call, you will speak to a real person. And we're not going to give out the phone number. You can find it on the website.
Yeah.
But our team is real.
We got
our
commenters, ruthless.
Yeah. Our team is landlords. Our landlords were investors. We understand the plight. So we want to help as many people as possible and make a lot of money.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys. We'll
Great to talk to you guys and meet you today.
Appreciate it.